Hi, everybody. Welcome to CoreLight's Spiritual Weather Report. It's October 30th, 2022, and this is Brad, and I'm very, very happy to be here with you today. Welcome to everybody who's new to CoreLight and all of our old friends too, as always. And gosh, October has been a really big month for many people I know. It was a big month for Leslie and me personally. We just celebrated the 30th anniversary of our life partnership this month. And that also means that CoreLight's been going for over 30 years, which it kind of feels amazing to me. In a way, it feels like a blink. And yet so much has happened in 30 years. And I guess I've been reflecting on that's just the nature of time, isn't it? That it's such an illusion. And here we are facing incredible situations on Earth in this world of ours that is an illusion at one level, and yet it has its reality. So anyway, it's a very intense time, as I've said almost every month for as long as I can remember. And it's also a very exciting time. So much light and also so much shadow all at the same time. And it reminds me of the Dickens quote, the best of times and the worst of times, right? I know a lot of people who are feeling that way. So we're going to look at this today. We're going to talk about some very practical ways that we can be navigating the challenges that we're all facing right now, as well as some ways to take advantage of these extraordinary waves of light that are flooding the earth at the moment. So before I get to, I'm not going to get into it right now. We'll talk about that later. But in case you're new, the way this works is every month I tune in on what's happening in the collective consciousness, and I'm always shown a few themes to speak about on these calls. And the 6 themes that I got for today are, get my notes here, an old cycle ending and a new one beginning. Number 2, lessons from nature. Number 3, re-examining our most basic beliefs. And number 4, out with the old and in with the new. And number 5, transcending the fear of saying no. And number 6, identifying what serves us and brings us joy. So for anybody who might be new to the Spiritual Weather Report calls, I start by offering a guided meditation, and then I speak about these prevailing energies that are affecting us and also the spiritual principles that are most helpful for us right now in navigating these times. And then we have time after that for questions and answers, and we close the session with a brief guided meditation or a prayer or whatever we have time for. And if you need to leave before the call ends, you can always listen to the recording later. We do send out the link to the email list, and it's also posted on YouTube. So before we begin with our guided meditation, I just had a couple of quick updates I wanted to share with you. One is a very exciting update. In January, I'm going to be recording an audio book of The Marriage of Spirit. And we've been wanting to do this for a very long time. We plan to make it available sometime in the middle of 2023, along with a new edition of The Marriage of Spirit in paperback, as well as a course on an online course on the Marriage of Spirit. The Marriage of Spirit is the first book that Leslie and I wrote together. So we're just super excited about this. And I invite you to stay tuned. We'll be sending out information around all of that by email when it's time. And then the last thing to say is that, as I mentioned last month, there have been some technical delays with the launch of our learning management system, which is the online platform where we'll be offering CoreLight's courses. And so again, I apologize that we have not been able to offer the Spiritual Warrior Training course yet or the Marriage of Spirit course yet, but we have resolved the issues. So we're making good progress with building the system, and we're planning to launch it in early 2023. And I really appreciate your patience. I promise you that it's definitely going to be worth the wait. It's going to be beautiful and easy to use, and we're super excited about this as well. So please stay tuned on that as well, and I will be sharing more about that with you by email when it's time. Okay, so let's have our guided meditation. Again, welcome everybody. And I invite you now to just get comfortable, sit in some comfortable place or lie on the floor and close your eyes and take a few long, slow, deep breaths and just relax. Long, slow inhales, long, slow exhales. Just letting go. Nowhere to go, nothing to do, just being right here, right now with your spiritual journey in this beautiful field of love that we create together. And it doesn't matter if you're listening live or in the future. At one level of reality, there is no time and space. And so we actually are all together on these calls, no matter what time you're listening. So continue long, slow breathing, breathing in the light, breathing out any tension in the body. Breathing in deep peace. And breathing out the shadow. Breathing in the present moment. And breathing out any worries, any concerns about the past or the future. Just letting go. And as you probably know, while we do these meditations, at some level of Leslie's being, she is overriding these calls. And there's a transmission of healing energy that comes through to us from another level. And, we do speak a lot on these calls, a lot of talking, but the truth is that the main thing that happens on these calls is about the energy. There's an energetic experience. So we invite you throughout the 2 hours to just be as meditative as you can and receive the transmission, even while we're talking, even as you might be multitasking. Just letting go. Relaxing deeply. So as we continue to breathe, let's do a muscular relaxation as we always do from head to toes. And I invite you to visualize and feel a warm, viscous liquid pouring over your head like honey. Just relaxing all the muscles that it touches. So relaxing the scalp. Feeling it pouring over the forehead, relaxing the forehead and the eyebrows, pouring over into the eye sockets, relaxing your eyelids, the eyes, temples, cheeks, nose, ears, the whole area of the mouth and jaw. The back of the tongue. And feel how when you relax the back of the tongue, It relaxes the whole region of the back of the head and the neck and the shoulders. Just feeling the warm honey pouring down over you and relaxing all of these muscles. Feeling it pouring over your shoulders and down your arms. Relaxing your arms all the way down to the hands, fingers. Remembering your breathing as well, just breathing in the light, breathing out any tension the muscles might be holding on to. So feel this warm honey pouring over your chest and your upper back, pouring down over your diaphragm, your abdomen, your lower back. Pouring over your pelvis, the whole pelvic region, the hips, psoas muscles, buttocks, genitals. Pouring down and relaxing your legs, upper legs, front and back, lower legs, front and back, ankles, feet, and toes. And so I'll be quiet for a few moments, and I invite you to scan the body again from head to toes and just breathing the light into any areas where you're still holding on to any stress. Breathing out that tension in the body. So now I invite you to put your attention on the root chakra, which is at the base of the spine, for those of you who might be new to this. And just feel how when you put your attention there, the root chakra naturally relaxes and opens. And feel your grounding cord dropping down from your root chakra down to the center of the earth. Feel your physical body connecting with the energy of the earth. And just for a moment, put your attention on where your body meets the earth, through the soles of the feet, through the parts of you touching the chair, floor. Just be with your connection with Mother Earth for a moment. And feel how she supports you from beneath. And feel gravity gently pulling you towards Mother Earth. And just deeply relaxing into her embrace like a little baby in the arms of its mother. Just letting go. Nowhere to go, nothing to do, no worries. Just being and feeling the connection and the support of Mother Earth. Feel how grounding this is. Feel how supported you are. Feel how safe you are. And now I invite you to draw the energy of Mother Earth up through the soles of your feet, up your legs, all the way up to the root chakra, and up the core of the body, all the way up to the top of the head. I invite you to put your attention right in the center of your head. See if you can find that spot that's right in the center of your head. And sometimes it's helpful to draw an imaginary line from the third eye, which is the point just between the eyebrows and slightly above, back into your head. And then draw another imaginary line between the ears. And where those two imaginary lines intersect, that's the center of your head. So I invite you to just put your attention there for a few moments. Breathe into that place and relax. And there's no effort here. Just being with it. Not a doing, it's just a relaxing and a feeling and a being. And it's okay if you don't feel it. You can visualize it. Just in a very relaxed and gentle way. No stressing, no efforting. And you'll feel, and you find that place in the center of your head. It's a very special place in the subtle body. When you find it, it helps you to stop thought and relax. And you feel a bit of an expansion of your energy field, especially around your head. And there's a letting go that happens when you find this place. So just breathing, just relaxing, just allowing the energy to concentrate there, right in the center of your head. The ancient yogis had a name for this place. They call it the Cave of Brahman. For those of you who might be new to this, I know if you've been around a while, you know about this. Cave of Brahman. Brahman is one of the names of God in ancient Hindu texts. Just relaxing into this beautiful space. I can feel as a group, we're starting to hold this space together. I like to think of this place as such a beautiful feeling in the body. I like to think of it as the seat of the witness self, a part of us that just gently observes life, just gently observes the body, gently observes the emotions and the thoughts passing through us. And this part of us knows that we are not the thoughts and we are not the emotions and we are not the body. We are pure awareness. pure love, pure consciousness. But there's this loving, gentle, neutral I that is observing life. And it's interesting that it's an eye. It literally is like a retina in the pituitary. The pineal, pituitary, and hypothalamus glands are right in the center of the head. And the pituitary is called the inner eye. And it literally has a mechanism that's like the retina of the two physical eyes. So just be with this space and feel this very gentle, loving, neutral space. And the more you attune to this space, the more helpful, the easier it is to watch ourselves, observe ourselves with love and with compassion and tenderness. Because this is the place, it's one of the places where we connect with our soul. It's like a window to the soul. So just breathing, relaxing, and hanging out in this beautiful space where nowhere to go and nothing to do. Just a being and a letting go. And as we all continue to hang out in this space, I'm going to say a prayer and an invocation for our call today. We call on the Great Spirit, Divine Mother, Father God, the Self that we all are. We call on all of our spiritual guides, all the beings of higher consciousness on the inner planes who surround us, the highest love and the highest light. We invite you into our sacred circle today. And again, this includes everybody who's listening in the future, because there is no time and space at this level of reality. So we invite the guides in, and we ask that you please surround us in a cocoon of beautiful white light and love and healing energy. And guide our conversation into the highest love and the highest wisdom. Hold our hands as we walk into our soul's highest purpose in this incarnation. And we give thanks. We give thanks for the opportunity to be together and to receive and to share this field of love and to be in these beautiful bodies incarnated on planet Earth at this most extraordinary time, at the changing of the ages, as we exit the systems of patriarchy and separation and move into the new paradigm of the heart, opening to a whole new level of ourselves as love. The shift from the love of power to the power of love. What an amazing time to be here in these bodies for a few years. So we give great thanks for the gift and the opportunity. And we say a special prayer and a blessing today for all life on the planet, for all beings, the whole of the natural world, May we all know peace and love and joy. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Alalaho. So when you're ready, I invite you to slowly start to wiggle your fingers and toes and maybe stretch a little bit. Yawn. Oh. And when you're ready, slowly begin to open your eyes. Oh. Okay, well, welcome again, everybody. Welcome to CoreLight's Spiritual Weather Report for October 30th of 2022. And so happy to be here with you, as always. The first topic, let's just launch right into the topics for the day. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, the first topic is an old cycle ending and a new one beginning. And we've been talking for the past several months about the time of formlessness that we've been in. It's been a time when many people are feeling a lack of structure, and we've been practicing surrendering to the unknown. And for many months, it's been a time of paradox. We've talked about that on the calls for the last several months. And it's about learning to be okay with not having the answers and feeling like we're wandering around in a haze. So for many of us, we've been practicing sitting in the discomfort and the awkwardness of all of this and learning to be okay with it and practicing a deeper level of spiritual surrender and detachment, at least as much as we're able to. And I think the really exciting thing about this time is that now things are starting to shift, and I wonder if you're feeling that. Some of the forms are starting to be revealed. There's more clarity about the ending of an old phase of our lives, and we're starting to catch glimpses of the beginning of a new cycle. There's still a lot of unclarity and formlessness, but there's definitely a birth of a new phase that's just beginning. So you may still be feeling the awkwardness and the formlessness, and you may still feel like you're wandering around in a great unknown. And most people are probably still focused on closing out this old cycle in some ways. But it's a really good time to start paying attention to the signs of the new cycle that might be beginning for you. It may still take a little time for it to show up for you, but it's starting to happen for a lot of people. Almost everybody I know is stepping into some new level of their path right now. So, for example, it might be moving into a new home, or a new creative project might be birthing, or a new relationship beginning, or you're making a decision to end your old job, and you feel, even though you might not know what it is, you might feel a new something more inspiring job out there somewhere. But even if you don't know what it is yet, this may be a more inward kind of rebirth happening in your life, where you're making new resolutions, new ideas coming forward, new commitments to become a different person in some way. But whatever it is, whatever that looks like for you, this time that we're in right now is about an opportunity to step into a new level of your power and your creativity and your sovereignty, and to make these new commitments to the things that serve you the most and open your heart and get you inspired and bring you joy, and to continue letting go of the old forms. So at a really practical level, this is a great time to do a cleanse or a purge of some kind. Like, for example, you might feel like cleaning out closets or fasting or detoxing the physical body in some way, or doing some kind of personal inventory, making these commitments, as I said, to let go of the old and invite something new in. It might be something like making a deeper commitment to your self-care, maybe carving out an extra 15 minutes each day for some kind of practice that really feeds you. But whatever it is, it's all about throwing out the things that don't serve us anymore. And it's about opening up the space for this new thing to come in, whatever it is, whether it's getting rid of physical possessions or cleansing the body or moving on from old relationships, or purging old habits, ways of being in the world, because we're being invited to take some kind of action right now to let go of the old and to open up the space for something new. So in light of this, there's something I'd like to share with you. This is a personal experience that affected me very deeply this month, and it includes some lessons from nature that are great reminders for all of us right now as we complete this old cycle and we start a new one. And you may have heard that Hurricane Ian hit the coast of southwest Florida on September 28th. And that was just a few days after last month's spiritual weather report. It was a Category 5 hurricane, and the winds were over 150 miles an hour, and there was a lot of flooding and destruction. And it made landfall right here on the coast where I've been living on and off for the last few years. So literally the eye of the storm went right over here. So I thought on today's spiritual weather report, we need to include a little bit of a physical weather report too, or at least some of the lessons that Mother Nature teaches us through the weather. So for me, in an act of grace, I happened to not be here at the time of the hurricane. I left about 10 days before the storm, and I was in the northeast of the U.S. I was caring for my parents who are in their 80s because my mother had a surgery. And I also was attending a gathering of CoreLight's board of directors. And these events had been planned a few months ago. So it felt like an incredible act of divine synchronicity. I felt so blessed not to have been here for the hurricane. The winds and the flooding were maybe one of the worst ever to hit Florida. It caused just a massive amount of damage, and many people lost their homes and their cars and most of their possessions, and some people died. And there was a massive amount of damage to the ecosystems here and a loss of wildlife. And I'm not sure how much you know about hurricanes hitting the southeast of the U.S., but when they happen, the damage and the destruction and the loss of life is pretty extraordinary. So I returned here to this area a couple of weeks after the storm, as soon as the power was restored. And fortunately, my car and my apartment were not, let's say, significantly damaged. There was a little bit of damage, but not much. But it took a while before there was power and clean water and internet in this area, and before the businesses could start to reopen and so forth. So you can imagine how challenging that is for the people who were stuck here. You know, I was gone, but God bless the people who were here. You know, it's not really easy to live without those basic necessities. So the devastation and the trauma are pretty intense here. And for the past couple of weeks since I've been here, it's been really difficult. It's not just that I'm feeling empathy for everybody, and, you know, I feel the sadness about the destruction of the natural world. And, you know, that level of emotional trauma is definitely here. But But it's also that energetically, being in an area where there's been so much trauma is challenging. And if you're a sensitive person, as I'm sure most of you are if you're listening to the call, then energetically, you're working with the trauma of a place. Even if you're not conscious, you're doing it. And a lot of that healing work happens at night when we're sleeping. I think we all work with this collective energy to the degree to which we're able. And I think the more we clear the ego and the more we live with an open heart and the more empathic we become, the more we're able to help with, let's say, transmuting collective traumas. So it's been really hard for me at one level to be here. I've had a lot of disturbed sleep and some strange things going on with the physical body. And there's just been a lot of sadness and grief at seeing all of the loss and the destruction here. And as I've mentioned on the calls before, this area is one of my favorite places in the whole world. The beauty of the natural world here is just so exquisite. We've got the Gulf of Mexico and all the sea life and dolphins and manatees and fish and bird life and all these interesting reptiles and amphibians and the mammals and there's just so much here and the beautiful palm trees and the mangrove forests. If you don't know what a mangrove is, those are the trees that grow in the shallow water and they're all over this area. And I just love to kayak through those forests. It feels like you're in another world when you're out there in the mangrove forest. So anyway, to see the level of destruction and toxicity that's here, it's just been super hard. And when there's flooding, there are a lot of broken sewage pipes and, all kinds of chemical toxicity washing into the Gulf of Mexico and into the rivers. And you can't get in the water anymore because of that. And so you can imagine that all has such an intense impact on the whole of the natural world here. And I was told, for example, that there are tens of thousands of cars that washed into the Gulf. Can you imagine that? I mean, just try to fathom that. It's unbelievable. And it's going to take so long to get all of those cars out and not to mention all the other debris, the houses and, glass and nails and just to get everything out of the water. It's really hard to fathom the kind of cleanup that's going to have to happen in a place like this. So it's challenging. It's challenging to feel collective pain and trauma. And I'm sharing this with you because I think it's important that we're all aware that as sensitive people, many of us do this work naturally, whether we're conscious of it or not. And some of you may or may not resonate with this, and it's okay if you're not. Some people are much more empathic than others, and there's no judgment about, whether you're more or less empathic or more or less conscious of it. But we're all somewhere on that spectrum, on that scale of empathy. And many spiritual people are empathic to a significant degree. So I would imagine that many of you on this call can resonate with what I'm talking about. And this is a gift that we offer. This is our act of service and our act of love. And as I said, the more we do the egoic clearing work and the more we can live in our hearts, the more that we're able to serve the earth in this way. And that's why we made CoreLight's tagline, change the world by changing yourself. We're all connected. And the clearer we are inside and the more we can live in love, the more that we're able to give and the more we're able to support others in this way. So whether you're in an area that's been traumatized, like by hurricanes or fires or earthquakes or any kind of natural disaster, or if you might be in a war zone, like I know some of my European friends are feeling like they're at the edge of that at the moment. Or if your area has been devastated in some other way, or even if you're not in a place like that, whatever the case is for you, we're still working with collective trauma at some level because the whole world is going through such a massive change at the moment and so much trauma. We talk about this often on these calls, but it's worth reiterating here. This is the shift of the ages. We're in this pivot point where human consciousness is moving out of thousands of years of this old paradigm of separation and patriarchy and into the new paradigm of the heart. And we're in an especially intense phase of that journey right now. The 2020s are a time of massive upheaval at so many levels. It's literally the falling away of an old life. And sometimes the weather is used to help with this. And sometimes the changes come about through other ways. But no matter what it looks like, no matter how it happens, all of the old systems that served us for so long are crumbling. They're outmoded. And they're leaving. And that includes the physical systems that are going through all the massive changes that we can see, like our governments and the financial system and the education system and the healthcare system and on and on. And this kind of very intense change can be traumatic. And so there's a collective grieving that's happening. We're all grieving at some level of our being about the loss of an old life. Even though we're all pretty conscious that the systems of Earth are very broken and old and outmoded and they have to change. And it's helpful to be conscious of this grieving process and to spend time focusing on it when you can. Because by doing that, you're consciously working on releasing those energies from your body. And you're allowing grieving. And you're witnessing that. And you're letting it all go. So even if you're not physically in an area that's directly affected by a traumatic event, if you're sensitive, you're still working with the energy of collective trauma. Because we're all doing what we can to help humanity and the Earth to make this shift right now. Let's see. So one of the other really interesting aspects of this experience that I wanted to share with you, because the lesson really applies to all of us, is most of the people I know here who are on a spiritual path are doing so incredibly well. Whether they lost their possessions or their homes or not, and despite the intensity of the collective trauma, it has been so amazing to watch this, especially the people who are practicing witnessing. And just for those who might be new to CoreLight, witnessing is the practice of feeling our emotions passing through us while knowing that we're not the emotions. And the same with the thoughts, watching them move through and knowing we're not our thoughts. And the same with our physical bodies and our behaviors, you know, just knowing that this is not who we truly are. And witnessing is about remembering that we're pure awareness, we're pure consciousness, pure love. And all these experiences are temporary and they are just passing through us. So we're talking about an ability to feel, to feel very deeply and not to suppress emotions, but also at the same time to practice spiritual detachment. And this is a practice I'm not going to go into deeply today, but it's the ultimate liberation. This is really spiritual awakening. And so the more we practice witnessing, the more awake we are. And the more we're able to keep our hearts open no matter what the outer circumstances look like. And I meant to mention, some people have written to me lately and asked for a workshop on witnessing. And so I just wanted to let everybody know that I'm planning to offer one next year when I teach the online course on the marriage of spirit, which is the book that Leslie and I wrote that includes a chapter on witnessing. So if that interests you, please stay tuned for that. We're going to go into witnessing much deeper then. But for now, you can always just read the chapter in the book, in the Marriage of Spirit book that we wrote. So I know traumas, like the hurricane that we just had here, and really actually any stressful situation, even if it's not a major disaster, these things can really pull the rug out from under us sometimes. And if you can learn to maintain a certain level of witnessing during these stressful situations, this is how you learn to thrive even in the difficult times. And you can also help stabilize other people that way. Because when you set that example, people notice it. They notice that you have something that they can't name, but it's a kind of a poise, maybe. They sense the deep inner peace that you have, no matter what the circumstances are, and they want to know what your secret is. So that's when you can help people. And let me share another thing, something else that's happening here. It's just about how inspiring it's been to watch how a traumatic event like this can bring out the best in people. And as we all know, this is what happens during tragic experiences usually. People connect with other people in their community. People start helping each other. And so the traumatic event actually becomes a connecting experience. And I can tell you, I've met more people in my neighborhood in a week. I've met in a year and a half of being here. And so I've heard so many beautiful stories coming out, people helping their neighbors, especially people helping the elderly. There's so many elderly people here in Florida. And it's just incredibly heart-opening to watch so many people stopping what they're doing to help people. Really, the love and the compassion and the generosity, it really starts to shine through in situations like this. So I couldn't speak about this today without mentioning that. Another thing that's important, I think, for all of us to recognize right now is how amazing nature is. I've been observing it more lately, so I just wanted to underscore it today. When nature sweeps through an area like this with flooding or wildfires, or I know many people in the western U.S. states and also parts of Europe and Australia and other parts of the world, we've been experiencing these unprecedented fires in the past few years. And a few years after a fire or a flood or a hurricane, nature recreates life in this totally new way. And so she has her cleansing effect. And then there's a new balance that comes forward. There's a rebirth of a whole new ecosystem. And usually after a few years, nature's restored life so beautifully that it's hard to tell that there was even a fire or any kind of natural disaster. So I just feel like it's important that we remember this. I feel like this is one of the main lessons of life on planet Earth, that we're always part of that cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth. And as we move more and more into the new paradigm of the heart, we're returning to those laws of nature. We're remembering natural law. And we see that there's this kind of perfection to everything, no matter what it looks like. And I just have been so especially reminded of that with this hurricane that I just had to bring it up today. And there's, I'm looking at my notes here, excuse me. I just have something else I need to share with you about this. So, the palm trees. I've mentioned before on these calls how much I love the coconut palm trees. I don't know what it is, but there's something about them that's just so beautiful and relaxing for me. So the past couple of weeks, I've been taking my daily walk down to the water's edge and just hanging out with these coconut palm trees, even just for a few minutes. And I just marvel that for the most part, the coconut palms survived those 150-mile-an-hour winds. I mean, think about that. That's extraordinary. Many trees didn't survive, but the coconut palms did, even the ones that are right at the edge of the water where the storm hit the hardest. So these coconut palms have become my teachers again in the last couple of weeks because they've learned how to be strong, but also flexible enough to handle those extreme winds and not get uprooted. And you know what? They didn't even lose their palm fronds, the leaves at the top, most of them. I mean, to me, all the other trees were wiped clean of their leaves, but the coconut palms held on to their fronds. And I just think about that. How in the heck did they do that? And it's such a great metaphor. So I feel like they remind us to practice strength and courage and stamina and standing in our truth. And I think for us, sometimes that means saying no when we have to. But also, they remind us about the practice of bending with the wind, which is about flexibility and surrender and going with the flow. And so I think this is one of the most important spiritual lessons for all of us right now, are these things. And I invite you to hold that image of the coconut palm tree in your mind with me. It's a great reminder for us. So much of this is about a choice of where we put our attention. We can focus on the destruction and the pain and the fear and all of that, or we can practice seeing the love that is shining through everywhere. And these two things aren't mutually exclusive. As I've been saying, it's really important to give the heart its due and to grieve and to feel all of the emotions that are associated with that grief, like anger and sadness and the pain of the loss and all of that. But it's also important to release it from the body, let it go, and then move on and welcome in the new when it's time. Because nothing is ever just about the one side. It's not only about the loss. Nature is always cleansing, and then also she's always renewing through fires or floods or hurricanes or whatever it is. And we're part of nature. Humanity is nature. So much of what's happening to us all right now is about remembering this one thing, that we're letting go of an old way of life and we're making room for the birth of something new, just like nature. So we're almost done here with the hurricane part. There's one little other piece I wanted to share with you. That's in addition to remembering all of that and practicing witnessing, I wanted to say there are three other very fundamental practices that I've been finding super helpful right now. And you don't have to experience a hurricane to practice these things. No matter what you're experiencing, returning to these practices is really powerful right now. So let me get my notes here. The first one is, it's an especially good time to remember that things can be replaced. Life cannot. Second one is to practice gratitude for everything that we're given. The third is to practice deep spiritual surrender, which is really to say that we're allowing and we are loving whatever is unfolding right in front of us. So a great way to practice these things is first thing in the morning when we open our eyes, before the feet hit the floor. You can say to yourself 4 things. I'm grateful for another day of life in this body. I surrender to my highest path for today. To the best of my ability, I witness and allow and love whatever is unfolding in front of me. And the 4th one is, I'm part of nature. I'm always in a cycle of beginnings and endings and beginnings again. So that's what I've been doing lately, and I invite you to join me in that practice between now and next month's call. It's been very powerful for me, and I hope it is for you too. So last month, we talked about the process of individuation and becoming an adult, which is about taking responsibility for ourselves and making our own decisions. And so this month I wanted to follow up a little bit on that. It's a great time to look at some of our most basic beliefs, to re-examine them so that we can come into a closer alignment with our heart and with our soul and with our inner truth. So as children, our culture teaches us to trust authority. We're taught to obey. We learn to believe what our parents and our teachers believed because they taught us the things that they believed. And their parents and their teachers taught it to them. And it was passed along down the various lineages to the present time to us. And our parents and our teachers passed it along to us because it was a set of beliefs and guidelines that worked for them. And it worked for our society. Most of them for a very, very, very long time. So we tend to live our lives by these basic beliefs and these guidelines that are subterranean, and we do it unquestioningly, even though they might be really old and they might be completely outmoded. But they become habits. And then they become like the water that the fish swims in. And we don't even think about some of our most basic beliefs and ways of life. So what I was being shown is that now is a great time to re-examine some of our most basic beliefs. It's a great time to review all of this, and we keep what works and we throw out what doesn't work. So let me give you a few examples. Actually, I've got a lot of examples. I just want to share these with you because in case it's helpful, sometimes, when we have these very fundamental beliefs that are so subterranean, we can't even think of what they might be. So I spent some time thinking of some basic things I can share with you in case it's helpful. So one example, I'm looking at my notes here, one example would be our basic eating habits. Are we eating by rote? Or are we listening to the body and discerning what the body needs? Are we practicing intuitive eating? Or are we eating a certain diet because somebody in a position of authority told us we should? And by the way, I'm going to give you these examples, and I'm not suggesting anything. I'm not placing any judgment on anything. I just thought of these examples, and I'm inviting everybody as I speak about these. This is for me too. This is for all of us, that by simply naming them and looking at them, we get to do this practice of reviewing the beliefs and choosing which ones we want to keep and which ones we want to throw out and how we want to change them. So I'm not saying there's no shoulds here, there's no nothing, just naming. So another example is self-criticism of any kind. For example, are we critical of ourselves for being too old because we live in a culture that values youth so much? Are we critical of not measuring up because we're not smart enough, successful enough, wealthy enough, beautiful enough? Are we measuring ourselves against some standard that we were told we should try to attain instead of just being okay with who we are? Do we believe we're not working hard enough? If we take a break and we practice our self-care, do we criticize ourselves because we think we're being lazy? So how okay are you with yourself just as you are? How much do you love yourself? Here's another example that I came across this week. How well do you receive? Can you receive without guilt, even if you're not able to give anything back? And I know a lot of people have trouble with this one because we're taught that to be a giver is to be good. But we're usually not taught much about receiving because we believe we have to reciprocate. I just had this experience with the hurricane situation here. I was helping some neighbors who were away by cleaning out their refrigerator and the freezer because all the food went bad when the power was off 2 weeks, and it smelled terrible. It had all spoiled. And so I was doing this out of love, and I didn't expect anything in return. But they kept saying, as I would talk to them, they kept saying, we promise we're going to pay you back for this. And we're going to get you for this. And I thought it's so thoughtful and loving of them to say that, but I could tell that they were just really uncomfortable just receiving. And I could feel that they felt guilty about receiving this gift that I was offering, and that they didn't need to feel that way. But I could tell it was coming from some kind of childhood programming, probably some kind of religious programming. And so it reminded me of this spiritual lesson that sometimes, even if we have nothing to give back, just saying thank you, just expressing our gratitude is sometimes enough when somebody's offering us something out of love. So you can look at your ability to receive. Another example would be anything we think we have to do that doesn't really serve us anymore. Like maybe spending time with certain friends or family members because we feel we have some kind of obligation, even if we know that they drain us. Or what about feeling obligated to stay abreast of the news, even if we know that it's incredibly disturbing and makes us feel terrible, and we know that it drains our energy. Here's another example. Worrying about the people we love. How are you doing with that one? Most of us were taught that to worry about someone is to love them. But that's not true, because worry is fear energy. It's not love energy. And so when we worry about someone, we wrap them up energetically in our own fears, and it makes things more difficult for them, not better for them. And it doesn't make anybody any safer. So the question that we can all ask ourselves is, how much do we worry? How much do we worry about our loved ones or about animals or about the planet? And remembering that worry is just fear and it's not helpful. Here's the last example. Another example is not being able to say no to people and things that don't serve us anymore. And I think this is a really important one for all of us to look at. We're usually taught that we're bad and we're wrong if we say no. So we don't want to disappoint people. We don't want to disobey any rules. By saying yes all the time, no matter what, even when it doesn't feel in alignment with our own personal truth, we're basically practicing what I would call self-sacrifice and burden bearing. And that's part of the program we talked about last month, the Savior Martyr program, which is a very old program. Comes from it's being passed down through the religious lineages. And it just doesn't serve us anymore. We talked about it a lot in last month's call, so I'm not going to elaborate on it here. But basically, we're taught that saying yes all the time means that we're good. Saying no is being bad, being disobedient. And so we comply. And we go along with what everybody else is doing because there's some part of us that feels like we need to conform. All right, so that's enough of the examples. You get the idea. It's a good time to do this kind of inventory for your life, to re-examine some of your most basic beliefs and the guidelines for your life. It's time to throw out the things that don't work and keep only the things that work. It's time to say no to things that don't serve us and that don't resonate with our personal truth. And that includes practicing more than ever before, trusting and following the guidance of our hearts. So this practice is a lot about asking ourselves questions like, what's really serving me right now? What's not serving me right now? What brings me joy? Because when something brings us joy, it means it's in alignment with our heart. And that's how Spirit speaks to us, through the heart. So feeling joyful when we're engaged in something is a perfect indication that we are in alignment with our soul. It's part of our purpose. And I know this actually sounds really simple, but we do get stuck. We get stuck sometimes because of the programming from childhood. So how do we process those parts of us that make sacrifices in order to please other people? And that just go along with the family or with the crowd because it's easier, even though our hearts might tell us otherwise. And how do we heal those parts of us that would rather conform than say no? So some of the basic processes to take a look at would be things like the fear of not conforming. I'm going to list, I wrote them out here. There's 4 that I came up with. There's a lot, but I came up with 4 main ones for me, for all of us. Number 1, the fear of not conforming. Number 2, the fear of doing what pleases us. Number 3, the fear of being selfish and not being selfless enough. And as I said, these are all aspects of the Savior Martyr program, which we talked about last month. So if you didn't have a chance to hear last month's call, you can find it on our free resources page if you want to dive deeper into any of that. And so what we're doing here is naming some of the key fears. And whenever you discover a fear, that's one corner of a square. So you can do squares on these things. And if you're new to CoreLight, the squares are just a simple journaling technique that Leslie and I wrote about in the Marriage of Spirit book that I keep talking about. Squares are simple, but they're really powerful for creating shifts in consciousness. So let's just quickly name the corners of some of these squares in case this is resonating with you and you want to clear some of the programming. You can do it for home practice. The first one that I mentioned was the fear of not conforming. So what's the opposite of not conforming? Conforming would be the best opposite. So the 4 corners of that polarity would be the fear of not conforming, the desire to not conform, the fear of conforming, and the desire to conform. And so if you've never done a square before, all you do is you write about those 4 things in your journal, all the motivations behind those things. And by doing that, you are basically detailing out your own egoic programming. And then in the end, when it's all done, you make a prayer and you give the whole thing back to spirit and you ask for healing. And it's totally amazing how fast and powerful the shifts happen. And it's all about making the unconscious conscious. This is the path. And then you just release all of the stuff, all the limitations and the imbalances, and you give it all back and you let it go. And it's really simple. So let's do the next one. The next one was the fear of doing what pleases me. So what's the opposite of doing what pleases me? I would say doing what displeases me. So the 4 corners of that square would be the desire to do what pleases me, the fear of doing what pleases me, the desire to do what displeases me, the fear of doing what displeases me. And it's important to remember that we've all got all 4 corners inside us. And even if we don't think we do, we do. If we don't think we have a corner inside us, it means that the corner is unconscious. And there's usually a corner, or I would say almost always, there's a corner or 2 that are at least somewhat unconscious. So, for example, in this square, the unconscious corner might be the desire to do what displeases me. You know, you might think, well, I don't have that desire. I don't desire to do what displeases me, right? And it might seem like it doesn't apply, but if you dig a little bit, you'll probably find it in there somewhere. Like, for example, you might find a part of the Savior Martyr program. It might be part of the desire to self-sacrifice or to bear a burden because we're taught that that's being a good person. And this is all part of what we could call victim consciousness. And as we talk about sometimes on these calls, victim consciousness is the main process that everybody on the planet is working on transcending at the moment. This is the number one issue on planet Earth right now, is transcending victim tyrant consciousness. And the Savior Martyr program plays a really important role in that dynamic. It's victim, tyrant, and savior, right? The 3 of those things, victim, tyrant, savior, they're all bound up with each other. And we talked about that last month. Okay, so let's look at the last square. The last one was the fear of being selfish. What's the opposite of selfish? Of course, it is selfless. So the 4 corners would be the desire to be selfish, fear of being selfish, desire to be selfless, fear of being selfless. Okay, so I think that's enough on this subject for now. And if you feel inclined, you might want to try doing those squares for home practice between now and next month's call. And if you do, I hope it's helpful. I'd love to hear from you. If you wind up doing it, let me know how it goes. I always enjoy hearing from you. So speaking of which, I think I've shared everything I want to share for today. So we're going to go into the questions and sharing in a moment. But before we do, let's just summarize a little bit. So it's a great practice right now to look at our most basic beliefs and our habits, re-examine them so we can come into a better alignment with our own heart and soul. And that means especially looking at our fear of saying no and our willingness to conform, to go along with the old beliefs just because we were taught that that was the right thing to do. And also, especially, to practice following our hearts and to find our joy. Because that's how Spirit speaks to us, and it's how we get into alignment with our soul's purpose. And we need to process any parts of us that might be blocking us from living that way. So I invite you to try the squares. As I said, I hope those are helpful. And at the end of the call today, I'm going to say a prayer and make an offering of the squares, even though we actually didn't finish the squares. But if you're new to the work, that way you'll have a sense of how to say the offering up prayer when you finish doing the journaling practice about the four corners of the square. All right. So I feel complete with that. I'm going to take a sip of water, and then we'll go into the questions and the sharing. So first of all, I just want to thank everybody for the questions and the sharing that you send to me. I really appreciate hearing from you. I always do. It helps me actually with these calls. It helps me to keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening in the community and in the world. And so in case you're new, the way it works is you can always email your questions to me in advance to courses@CoreLight.org. And if you're on the call live, on the web call, you can type in your questions on the Q&A board, and those will be for next month's call. And it's not possible for me to always answer all the questions, but I do read all the questions, and I do get to as many of them as I can. And if it doesn't get answered by me, the answer always comes from somewhere. It might come from another teacher or somebody you know, or a book, or maybe a dream or something. Okay, here's the first one. It's from Anka. There's an ongoing stream of polarities coming up each day as I work with the exercises more and more. Does it ever stop? Reading your book, Living with Enlightenment, I get the idea that both you and Leslie practice a lot. I sometimes feel a bit disconnected to the outside world and lonely because I can't stop doing the triangles and squares. It makes me more sensitive, which is nice in some ways, but not with my social life. The thing that makes me most doubt what I'm doing is my lack of social life. With 2 kids and my work and my husband, processing everything is very hard work, although it's often rewarding. I don't want to change this because every moment I have for myself I treasure, and I don't want to fill with social engagements. Is this normal? Am I on the right track? If there even is a normal to begin with, or am I avoiding something? Am I right? Am I in my right mind to be doing this alone? I do believe I have some childhood patterns to attend to around the subject, so I'll get to that, but I'm not sure how to do this with the polarities and square techniques. Could you please explain a little about this? All right, well, thank you for your question, Anka. I think it's an important one for many people because these are issues that many people face. And I can tell you, definitely not, you're not alone. If you talk to anybody who's been on the path of self-inquiry for any length of time, most of them will tell you that they have asked the same kind of questions that you're asking. I remember asking lots of similar questions like this when I first started doing this work 30 years ago. Excuse me. So let me try to address some of them for you here, and I'm sure other people will appreciate that too. First of all, you ask if the ongoing stream of polarities ever stops, and the answer is definitely yes. It took many, many years for the ego to get imprinted, but it doesn't take nearly as much time to unravel the imprinting. It's like, we take a few decades to pack the suitcase, but then we can unpack it in a much shorter amount of time. That's kind of the principle of how this works. And it's important to remember that the ego is finite. The ego is not infinite. And there are milestone moments along the journey where It's like you complete a certain phase of the processing, and you realize it just doesn't seem so difficult anymore because you did it. You did a certain level of the clearing work. And so when those layers have been peeled away, you have a much more streamlined ego, that it's not as much work to manage it. There are fewer imbalances, and the polarities are not as extreme anymore. You have more equanimity, and life just gets a lot easier. So this practice does get a lot easier with time, which is important to remember. But I really understand what you're saying, and I have a lot of empathy for you. It does seem overwhelming sometimes, especially when you first get started. But just remember, it won't always be that way. And it's important to remember to just be kind and gentle with yourself and have patience with yourself. You know, just treat yourself as you would a child or a dear friend, because that's important. And as for feeling lonely and lacking a social life, I think a lot of people listening to this call can relate to what you're describing. I think what often happens is that when we discover that we're really passionate about waking up and about serving the earth and discovering who we are and opening the heart and clearing all those patterns that keep us stuck, we go through a metamorphosis. We realize that our awakening is what really matters to us the most. And so many of the other things that used to motivate us, they just don't hold as much energy anymore. So what happens is very natural. It's that our old lifestyle and many of our old friends and family members just start to fall away. And, we just don't spend as much time doing those things that we used to do, like socializing with the same people in the same kind of way. And I know that might sound sad or scary to some people because, we fear losing an old part of ourselves. But really, it's a very natural process. And it doesn't have to be dramatic or scary. This can all happen just very gracefully and in a flow. And in fact, that's normally the case in my experience for myself and for most people I know. We get worked up about it and we get scared by thinking about it, but it doesn't usually happen that way. It's usually very natural. I mean, I know my experience was that even though I loved my old friends and family members, and I still do, I also wanted to spend more time with people of like mind. I wanted to talk about spirituality. I wanted to talk about the spiritual path. So I just didn't want to hang out with the same people anymore because they weren't necessarily interested in what I was. So I was, as I said, it just became a very natural sorting out process, and I know that's true for most people on the path. And sometimes, depending on where you live and how busy your life is, you just don't have the time for much of a social life anymore. If you're practicing self-inquiry and you're benefiting from the processing work, then you probably have less time for socializing, and there'll be part of you that just feels okay about it. Even if that old part of you is not very sure and, part of you might miss the socializing in some ways, you can just talk with that old part of you. You can just reassure that part of you that everything's okay. Remind yourself that you're not alone in doing the work. There are many, many people on the planet who are doing the work and waking up. And it's in the millions now, many, many millions of people. So anyway, the whole thing happens in phases. there are phases where you might do a lot of egoic clearing work and you don't socialize much, but then you go through a phase where, a certain amount of the work's done and you've got lots of time with family and friends again, and you're socializing and I think what happens eventually, at least I know it happened for me and for many people I know, is that you start to meet other people of like mind and you start spending more time with them, and that becomes your new social life. You realize that keeping that kind of company, that's what feels right to you. That's what feeds you. That's what supports you on your spiritual journey. I think what we're really talking about here is it's that the path of spiritual awakening is sort of like being a pioneer. And the life of a pioneer can sometimes feel a little bit lonely. It's like you're out there, on the front lines or in the wilderness, and you're doing something that not many other people are doing. But even though it might feel lonely at times, there's a part of you that knows that you're passionate about it. It's what you really want to do. And it's your soul's purpose. So you just keep going. So just a couple more things, Anka, before we move on. One is that I think it's helpful to know how to process your way through loneliness, through, the feelings of being a pioneer. And it's also helpful to have some spiritual friends, or at least one friend who can be there for you to let you know you're not crazy, that you're not completely alone anyway, and that you're okay, and that it's normal to feel lonely sometimes when you're pioneering. So anyway, so what's the opposite of loneliness? What would you say is the opposite to loneliness? Maybe it's togetherness. Maybe it's socializing. Whatever it is for you, remember that it's just another polarity and you're experiencing one side of the polarity. So you can practice witnessing those feelings passing through you, and you release them, and it's okay. And you remember that this too shall pass. And remember that in time, everything turns into its opposite. So you're just having an experience of the one side of the polarity right now, which is the loneliness. And then there's going to come a time where you experience the other side, which will be the togetherness and the socializing. And I think one of the hardest things in the world that anybody can do is to look in the mirror. So that's why not a lot of people are doing the self-inquiry work when you look at the total global population anyway. It's a small percentage that choose to do that work. To look at ourselves and to practice making the unconscious conscious is not for most people. It takes courage to look at yourself. It takes courage to look at the shadow side. But it's also the most rewarding thing we can do. And it's the fast path to spiritual awakening. And the good news is that it's all moving much faster than ever before. It's like the intensity of the world energies continue to accelerate so intensely, and so does the awakening process. I remember when I first met Leslie long ago, her guide said to her back in the 1980s, they said, "What took you 10 years will take others 2. So they're speaking to the acceleration. So anyway, I hope that's helpful, Anka. Thank you for your question. I'm sure it's helpful to a lot of people. Oh, wait, there's a piece that I didn't address yet. I'm so sorry. There's one little piece. You said, I do believe I have some childhood patterns to attend to around this subject. So I'll get to that, but I'm not sure how to do this with the polarities and squares techniques. Could you please explain a little about this? Well, I mean, isn't it interesting that we took a little dive today into the squares? So I hope that gives you a little taste of how they can help clear the childhood programming. The polarities, triangles, and squares techniques are fantastic for clearing childhood patterns. And there's a lot more I can share with you about this, and we will be talking about it more when I teach the online courses next year, especially the Marriage of Spirit course. So you can be on the lookout for that. And if you're new, as I mentioned earlier, the Marriage of Spirit book is what Leslie and I wrote. It was our first book, and we do explain those 3 simple journaling techniques. And they're just super simple and easy, but they are very powerful and profound for creating transformation. And we wrote that book so you can get a good start with the work of clearing egoic patterning. But yes, it's really helpful to have a guide and to do some hands-on work together with somebody using the techniques, which is what we'll be doing in the course. And I remember that was true for me. When I first learned the techniques over 30 years ago, it was through some audios that Leslie had recorded, and they helped me a lot. But when it was when I was working with Leslie that the work really took off for me, when I was working more hands-on with it. And then I could go much deeper, and the clearing accelerated. So that's what we'll do. And so you can be on the lookout for that, and I look forward to seeing you there. So, okay, I hope that helps. And just know you're on the right track. You're doing great work. And remember, this is for you and everybody, that we're pioneers. We're pioneers doing this work. So hold the faith and stay courageous and keep up the good work. Okay. I think we have time for one more question before I would like to do a little deeper ending meditation and prayer at the end of the call today. Okay, the next one is from Linda. Linda says, can you please share some insights about finding abundance in the midst of much loss, both on an individual level and the collective level? What with climate change, species extinctions, job shortages, worker shortages, supply shortages, rising interest rates, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, people at borders fleeing danger. You get the idea. Thank you. All right, Linda, well, thank you for your question. It's a very good one, and I think there are a few things to say about all of that. First, I know that, let's see, there's a lot of different ways I could go with this, so just give me a moment here. Okay, so first, I think that a lot of people are in fear and despair about the state of the world, especially if you're watching the news. And a lot of people are angry as well. So it's not unusual to be in any of those states of mind nowadays, right? I mean, the news does seem like it is intended to stir up our emotions, to say the least. So my question for you and for everybody is, how are you doing with practicing witnessing these states of mind and these emotions passing through you? How are you doing with staying on your surfboard? I know sometimes it's easier than others, and I know plenty of people who completely fall off their boards and wipe out and get tossed around by the waves for a while. But then at some point, they get back on their boards again and they keep surfing. And this is the journey. We just need to remember to keep getting back on the board and practicing the witnessing as much as we possibly can. And with practice, the witness gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and our periods of being on the board gradually get longer. And until we're spending more time on the board than we are being tossed around by the waves. And eventually we get to the point where we're in the witness all the time. And that's awakening. It's about being in the witness all the time, keeping the heart open all the time. And it's also really important not to judge ourselves if we're not there quite yet. It's so important to have compassion for ourselves. You know, it's just like we wouldn't judge a 5-year-old for not being in college. So we need to have the same kind of compassion for ourselves when we fall off the surfboard. So let's see, regarding your question, Linda, I think it's important to name what's happening in the world right now. And that is that we are witnessing the end of the world as we've known it. And I just want to make sure everybody heard what I just said correctly. And especially that you heard the last part of what I said, because it's the most important part. I didn't just say it's the end of the world. I said it's the end of the world as we've known it. As we've known it. So we're watching an old way of life die. The old systems are not working anymore. The level of shadow that is rising up all over the world is off the charts. It is like we're getting to view the very darkest corners of human consciousness all over the world, in every country, no exceptions. It's all coming up. It's being made visible so we can shine the light on it and review it, see it for what it really is. And this is the path of awakening, right? I mean, this is about making the unconscious conscious so that we can witness it. And so the shadow can be transmuted into light and released back into the oneness. And so I think this is a good way to close the call for today, is to say that, even though it may be a really, really challenging time right now, and even though it's very easy to think the world's going to hell in a handbasket, it's especially important to remember that it's not just the end of an old way of life, that it's also the beginning of something new. And as I mentioned earlier, that's how nature works. And we're part of nature. There's never an ending without a new beginning. So I invite you to remember this when the news is selling us fear, selling us drama, sounds like all is lost. We do not have to choose to swallow this stuff. We can choose where to put our attention. If you're in despair, you can ask what inspires you to get up in the morning, and you focus on that. And you ask, what is your heart calling you to do? And you use that as your motivation to keep going. And if you're in fear, you remind yourself that fear is just a frequency. And then you remember to choose love whenever you possibly can. And you remember that you do have the choice. And if you're angry, then you feel the anger and you express the anger and you let the anger feel great. There's so many good reasons to feel angry right now. And I know I've said it on many calls, but, if you're not feeling angry sometimes, then there might be something wrong with you. And releasing the anger can be so healing. So give yourself permission to feel angry. It might be just the very thing you need. We've talked about that on these calls before. You scream into your pillow. You beat the bed with a tennis racket. You just make sure you don't hurt yourself or anybody else, and you practice witnessing while you do it so that you're not digging a deeper groove. You're releasing it. You're not imprinting it more inside yourself. And it's important to remember that you're not the anger. You're pure awareness. Anger is passing through you. And it's important to not let the anger spill over into hatred. And then, when the releasing of the anger feels complete, you let it go. And then you do something else. You do something that brings you joy. You smile. You laugh. You dance. You sing. So, just to complete and to come back to your question, Linda, you asked specifically about finding abundance in the midst of all this. And I would say that we block the flow of abundance in our lives when we go into fear and separation. And the abundance flows when we learn to choose love and connection. And we can do that when we learn to recognize that it's our choice of how we respond to the world. And, this circles back to what we talked about last month. This is part of the individuation process that we're all in. It's about learning to take responsibility for ourselves. And if you look at that word, responsibility, it's the ability to respond. And so this is our journey of becoming spiritually mature. It's about literally becoming spiritual adults, if you will. This is the journey that each of us are on individually and that we're on as a species. It is humanity's collective journey to wake up and to recognize our own power. And I'm talking about it's the power of love. And that we have the power and the responsibility to choose love and connection over fear and separation and war and violence and on and on. So the question for us is really, do we have enough of a witness on board to be able to choose to remember our love and our light and our joy? It only takes a small act of loving kindness to shift the energy. It's like that metaphor that it only takes one match to light up a big dark room. So just smiling at a stranger might be enough to change their mood and your own mood. And then there's the ripple effect from that. You never know how many other people are going to be affected positively because of your one small act of love. So the truth is not what we're being told in the news. The truth that you're not going to find in the news is that there's a massive wave of higher consciousness and love that is sweeping the planet at the moment. And it's like a tsunami. And anybody who's in resistance to it is going to be swept away. The wave is moving with all of us who are the midwives, all of us who are helping to birth this new paradigm of the heart. The wave is supporting us. So this is the wave that we're surfing. And so, we're going to see, and we are seeing, extreme resistance to the wave. The forces of separation are becoming more and more obvious, right? I mean, it's like you see them there. It's obvious what's going on, and it's like they're fighting for their lives. And that's because the wave of higher consciousness and love is so strong. So it means we're getting to see the darkest human shadow in high relief. And as hard as that may be at times, it's actually a great thing because it's about our awakening process. So it's really important right now to remember this and to hold on to the understanding. And there's great reason for hope. The pioneering work that we're all doing, this birthing of the new paradigm of the heart, it's entirely doable. We just need to be aware of what's really happening and keep remembering that the most important things we can do to help are practicing witnessing, clearing whatever shadow arises, and choosing love at every possible opportunity that we can. And it's true that where we put our attention is what manifests. So I invite all of us to remember that and to focus on the love and focus on the light and focus on the joy as much as we possibly can. And I'm not talking about suppressing shadow, of course. It's about doing the egoic clearing work as well, releasing the shadow as well. So I think we can all stand to remember that love is everywhere. Love is who we truly are. And we can always look for the love in any situation. We can always practice shining our love, shining our light. And we're all in that process of just becoming that love that we are. Okay. All right. I think that's a good place to stop for today. I want to thank you all for your questions and your sharing again. I'm really grateful. And I think let's take we've got about 10 minutes. So why don't we take that time to do our closing meditation and prayer. And I'm going to be offering up the polarities and squares. And I think we'll do some affirmations as well. Okay, so I invite you to just close your eyes and get comfortable and take a few long, slow, deep breaths. Breathing in the light. Releasing any shadow that might have gotten stirred up by our talk today. Breathing in the love and the peace. Breathing out any tension, any stress, any shadow. Let's continue. I'll just be silent while we do a few breaths. Just feeling yourself dropping in, completely relaxing. We call on the Great Spirit. We call on all the guides and the beings who are surrounding us in the highest love and support. And we're making an offering of all of the polarities and squares that we've named today. Not conforming versus conforming. Doing what pleases me versus doing what displeases me. Being selfish versus being selfless. And all the others that we mentioned, whatever they were. So we're giving back these imbalances. We release them. We are finished with them. We let them go. And as we make this offering, We claim our birthright of the ascended balance states. And we ask for support with claiming that birthright. And I know there are many ascended balance states we could name here, but let's just name a few. So we claim our sovereignty, knowing that only we know what's right for us. Nobody outside of us knows what's right for us. We are responsible only for ourselves. And we trust ourselves. And we claim the state of compassion, to live in a state of compassion, to live in unconditional love. This is our birthright. And we're calling those energies in now. They are inside of us, and we bring them forward. And we ask for the support of grace. So let's just do a few more breaths. Breathing in these states of sovereignty, compassion, love. Breathing out any shadow that stands in the way of that. Any limitations. Any imbalances. Letting them go. There's a lot of energy moving. So just be with this. And I'm going to say just a few sentences, and I invite you, these are affirmations, and I invite you to repeat them after me if you want to. You don't have to if you don't feel ready for any reason. But if it feels right to you, it's helpful to say these things. I'm grateful for another day of life in this body. I'm grateful for another day of life in this body. I'm grateful for another day of life in this body. I surrender to my highest path for this day. I surrender to my highest path for this day. I surrender to my highest path for this day. To the best of my ability, I witness and allow and love whatever is unfolding in front of me. To the best of my ability, I witness and allow and love whatever is unfolding in front of me. To the best of my ability, I witness and allow and love whatever is unfolding in front of me. I'm part of nature. I'm part of nature. I'm part of nature. I'm always in a cycle of beginnings and endings and beginnings again. I'm always in a cycle of beginnings and endings and beginnings again. I'm always in a cycle of beginnings and endings and beginnings again. Just continue your breathing, breathing in the love, breathing out any shadow. We say a special prayer for this earth. Great Spirit, we are your hands and your heart and your voice. And we offer ourselves in service. Please strengthen our capacity to love, to witness. And we call this forward as our birthright. And we give great thanks, knowing this is so. May all of our thoughts and words and actions contribute in some way to the happiness of all beings. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Alalaho. And so I close our call today by saying thank you to everybody for showing up. Again, whether you're with us present time or listening in the future, thank you for participating in the field of love. I'm so grateful to be part of this community with you. And I wish you all the best. Send you so much love. And look forward to being with you again next month in November. All my love. Bye for now.